The Galactic Trade Station Nexus 7 was the largest market in the sector. Ships from 100 worlds docked at its ports every day. Merchants sold everything here: weapons, technology, medicine, food, and slaves. Stood on the auction platform with her hands bound by glowing energy cuffs. She was 26 years old. Her black hair was dirty and tangled. Her jumpsuit was torn at the shoulder. She had not eaten properly in 3 days. Around her, the plaza buzzed with activity. Aliens of every shape and size walked past the auction stage. Some had scales, some had fur, some had tentacles or extra limbs. They talked and laughed and bargained as if buying people was the most normal thing in the universe. To them it was. The auctioneer was unnamed. He stood 9 feet tall with 4 muscular arms and blue skin. His voice boomed across the plaza as he sold slaves one by one. Next item announced: human female, planet of origin Earth, age young adult, category general labor. A few aliens in the crowd looked up with mild interest. Most did not bother. Humans were not valuable in the galactic market. They were small and weak compared to most species. They could not lift heavy loads like they could not survive extreme temperatures like they had no natural weapons like claws or fangs or poison. The only reason anyone bought humans was curiosity. Earth had only been discovered 30 years ago. Humans were still a novelty. Rich aliens sometimes kept them as exotic pets. Others used them for entertainment. Starting bid said 500 credits. Silence. 400 credits. Still nothing. Kept her face empty. She did not show fear or anger or hope. She had learned to hide her feelings months ago when the slavers first took her from Earth. She remembered that day clearly. She had been hiking alone in the mountains of Korea when the ship appeared. A bright light, a sudden force pulling her upward, then darkness. She woke up in a cage with 11 other humans. They were taken to a processing station where aliens examined them like animals, measured their height, checked their teeth, tested their strength. Was classified as low value. She was small, even by human standards. She stood only 5 feet 2 inches tall. She weighed less than 50 kilograms. The slavers marked her file with a note: suitable for light domestic work only. They did not check her mind. 300 credits, said sounding board. Anyone. A hand rose in the crowd. Looked at the buyer. He was of a species known for their size and aggression. He stood 8 feet tall with dark green scales and 2 curved tusks growing from his lower jaw. His eyes were yellow with vertical pupils like a snake. 300, they said. His voice was deep and rough. Sold, replied immediately. He wanted to move on to more valuable merchandise. Buyer, you may collect your property at Gate 7. 2 guards grabbed Sar's arms and pulled her off the stage. They dragged her through the crowded plaza toward the collection area. Aliens stepped aside to let them pass, but no one looked at her. She was just cargo, not worth attention. Was waiting at Gate 7. Up close, he was even more terrifying. Scars covered his scales. One of his tusks was chipped. He wore a vest made from the skin of some animal did not recognize. Human said, looking down at her, "You are small." Said nothing. I own fighting pits on 9, continued. My fighters need servants. You will clean, you will carry, you will do whatever you are told. If you disobey, you will be punished. If you try to escape, you will die. Do you understand? Yes, said quietly. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. Good. Humans learn fast. That is the only useful thing about your species. He turned and walked toward his ship. The guards pushed to follow. As they walked through the station, counted everything. She counted the guards. She counted the doors. She counted the security cameras and the emergency exits and the weapons each guard carried. She noted which species seemed friendly with each other. She watched how the station's systems worked. She listened to conversations and learned new words in alien languages. This was what humans did. They watched, they learned, they adapted. On Earth, humans had been weak and slow compared to lions and wolves and bears. They had no fangs or claws. They could not run fast or climb well or swim far. But they had survived. They had more than survived. They had conquered their planet. Not through strength, through patience, through planning, through the ability to work together toward distant goals. The aliens did not know this. They looked at humans and saw only small, fragile bodies. They never looked deeper. Ship was a cargo vessel built for transporting slaves. was placed in a holding cell with 3 other humans, 2 men and 1 woman. They looked broken. Their eyes were empty. They had given up hope. Sat in the corner and studied them. The older man had calloused hands, a worker. The younger man had scars on his face, probably from fighting. The woman was thin and pale. She had been sick. "Where are we going?" asked. The older man looked at her with dull eyes. "9, the fighting pits." "Have you been there before?" 2 years, he laughed bitterly. "I clean the blood off the arena floor after each match." "How many humans are there?" The man frowned at her question. "Why do you want to know?" Leaned closer. "Because I am going to get us out." The man stared at her for a long moment, then he shook his head. "Impossible. The compound is heavily guarded. There is nowhere to run. Other slaves have tried to escape. They all died." "They tried alone," said. "We will not be alone." The man looked at her like she was crazy. Maybe she was, but had made a promise to herself on the day she was captured. She would not die a slave. She would not spend her life serving aliens who saw her as less than an animal. She would escape, and she would make them pay. The ship's engines rumbled to life. Through the small window of her cell, watched the station grow smaller as they flew away. 9 was 3 days away, 3 days to plan, 3 days to learn everything she could about her fellow prisoners. 3 days to begin building her army. Closed her eyes and started to think. 9 was a dying world. The sky was always dark red. The air smelled like sulfur and rust. Nothing grew on the rocky surface except strange black plants that cut your skin if you touched them. Its compound sat in a valley between 2 dead mountains. It was surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Inside the walls were barracks for fighters, cells for slaves, training areas, and the arena. The arena was the heart of everything. It was a circular pit dug deep into the ground. Stone seats rose up around it in tiers, enough to hold 5,000 spectators. The floor of the arena was covered with sand. The sand was stained dark from years of blood. Arrived at the compound on a cold morning. Guards led her and the other new slaves through the main gate. She kept her head down but her eyes open. She counted the guards. She measured the walls. She noted where the cameras pointed. A overseer named Bark assigned her to cleaning duty. He gave her a uniform, a bucket, and a brush. "You clean the fighter barracks," Bark said. "Every day, start at dawn. Finish before the fighters return from training. If they find dirt, you get punished. Understand?" "Yes," said. "Good, your cell is in Block 7. Food is served twice a day. Do not speak to fighters unless they speak to you first. Do not leave the compound. Do not cause problems." Bark looked at her with bored eyes. "You are nothing here, remember that." Nodded and went to work. The first week was hard. The work was endless. The food was bad. The cell was cold at night. Other slaves avoided her because she was new. But did not complain. She did her work quietly and perfectly. She learned the layout of the compound. She memorized the daily schedule. She watched and listened and remembered everything. By the second week, she had counted 47 fighters from 12 different species. The strongest was a warrior named. He was massive, nearly 10 feet tall, with skin as hard as stone. He had killed 93 opponents in the arena. Everyone feared him. The guards numbered 30. They carried pulse rifles and neural whips. Neural whips caused terrible pain without leaving marks. The guards used them often. There were over 200 slaves in the compound. Most worked in the kitchens, the laundry, or the cleaning crews. Some worked in the medical wing, treating wounded fighters. A few worked in maintenance, fixing broken equipment. 23 of those slaves were human. Found them one by one. The first he was a young man, maybe 24 years old. He worked in the medical wing as an assistant. He had been captured from Earth 6 months before. She met him one night by the water station. They were both filling bottles for their cells. "You are the new human," said quietly, "from the last transport." "Yes, my name is." He glanced around to make sure no guards were watching. "How are you finding this place?" "I am learning," said. "Tell me about the other humans." Frowned. "Why?" "Because we need to help each other." He was silent for a moment, then he leaned closer. "Most have given up. They believe escape is impossible. A few tried to run last year. The guards caught them within an hour. They were executed in the arena as entertainment." "How did they try to escape?" "They stole weapons and tried to fight their way out." Shook her head. That was stupid. You cannot fight 30 guards with stolen weapons. Then what would you do? Asked. There was doubt in his voice, but also a tiny spark of hope. I would wait, said. I would watch. I would learn every weakness in this place. I would find allies. And when the time was right, I would strike so hard and so fast that they would not know what happened until it was too late. Stared at her. You are serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. He was quiet for a long time, then he nodded slowly. There is a woman named, she works in the kitchens, she still has fight in her, and a man named in maintenance. He knows the compound systems better than the guards do. Good, I will find them. Over the next 2 months, built her network. Was 32 years old. She had been a chef on Earth before the slavers took her. Now she cooked slop for aliens who did not even know her name, but her eyes were sharp and angry. She wanted revenge. Was older, maybe 45. He had been an engineer. He knew how the power systems worked, how the doors locked, how the communication systems operated. He had been waiting for someone with a plan. Was the youngest, only 17. She had been captured with her parents. Her parents had died in the slave markets. Now she ran messages between different parts of the compound. She was small and fast, and nobody noticed her. There were others too, slowly, carefully connected them all. They met in secret in dark corners and empty rooms. They shared information. They made plans. They prepared. The aliens never noticed. Why would they? Humans were nothing. Humans were furniture. Humans were too weak and stupid to be a threat. That was exactly what wanted them to think. 3 months after her arrival, the opportunity came. Gathered his fighters in the main hall. His yellow eyes gleamed with excitement. We have received an invitation, he announced. The grand arena of the collective, the biggest fighting tournament in the sector, champions from 100 worlds, glory and fortune for the winners. The fighters cheered. The grand arena was legendary. Winning there meant fame across the galaxy. I will take my 12 best fighters, continued, and servants to attend them. We leave in 3 days. That night lay in her cell and smiled in the darkness. The grand arena, 50,000 spectators, the wealthy and powerful from a dozen species, all gathered in one place. She had been waiting for a target. Now she had one. She closed her eyes and began to plan. The grand arena was built inside an asteroid. From space, it looked like a small moon with lights glowing from thousands of windows. Ships approached it from every direction. Luxury cruisers carrying nobles, cargo vessels carrying fighters, small transports carrying merchants and gamblers. Watched through the window of ship as they approached. Her heart beat faster, but she kept her face calm. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Everything depended on the next few days. Had chosen 8 servants to accompany his fighters. Was one of them. So was, the others were aliens, a 2 and 3 smaller species whose names did not know. Their job was simple: carry supplies, clean equipment, treat wounds, stay invisible. The docking bay was enormous. Hundreds of ships were parked in neat rows. Guards in black uniforms directed traffic and checked credentials. Security was tight. The collective took protection seriously. Counted the guards as they walked through the bay. 52 in this section alone, all armed with pulse rifles, all wearing body armor. The main corridor led to the arena complex. It was like a small city inside the asteroid. There were hotels for wealthy guests, barracks for fighters, markets selling food and weapons and entertainment. Gambling halls where fortunes were won and lost in minutes. And at the center of everything, the arena itself. Saw it from a viewing platform. It was massive, bigger than any stadium on Earth. The fighting floor was a circle of white sand surrounded by walls 30 feet high. Above the walls, seats rose up in tiers until they disappeared into darkness. Lights hung from the ceiling like artificial stars. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice said behind her. Turned, a nobleman stood there watching her with amusement. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. They considered themselves the most civilized species in the galaxy. Yes, master, said, bowing her head. Human, the nobleman laughed softly. I have heard your species makes good pets. Perhaps I will buy one after the tournament. Said nothing. The nobleman lost interest and walked away. She turned back to the arena and continued counting. Guard positions, emergency exits, camera locations, everything. That night she met within the servant quarters. The room was small and crowded with beds, but the alien servants were already asleep. They did not care what the humans talked about. "I have mapped the eastern section," whispered. "There are 3 guard stations between here and the hangar bay. Each station has 4 guards. What about the central computer hub?" "It is in the lower levels. Section D, only 1 guard at the door. The hub controls power, communications, life support, everything." Nodded. This was better than she had hoped. They were arrogant. They did not expect attacks from within their own station. Their security focused on external threats, ships, weapons, known criminals. They did not watch servants. "What about the other humans?" asked. His eyes lit up. "I found them. 12 humans work here permanently. Kitchen staff, cleaners, maintenance, and there are more with other fighting groups. Maybe 30 total during the tournament." "Can they be trusted?" "Some. A woman named works in the power station. She has been here for 5 years. She hates the... A man named works in the hangar bay. He knows every ship. And a boy named, maybe 15, he works in the medical wing with me. Contact them quietly. Tell them to be ready." Hesitated. Ready for what exactly? Reached into her uniform and pulled out a small device. It was the size of a coin, made from parts she had stolen over the past 3 months, had taught her how to build it, had smuggled the components in food deliveries. "This is an EMP trigger," said. "Electromagnetic pulse. When I activate it, every electronic system within 500 meters will shut down. Lights, cameras, weapons, door locks, everything." Stared at the device. "Where will you plant it?" "The central computer hub. If I can get close enough, the pulse will spread through the main systems. The entire station will go dark." "And then?" Sighs were cold and hard. "Then we move." The next 2 days were busy. The tournament began with opening ceremonies. Fighters paraded through the arena while nobles cheered and placed bets. His champion, a massive named Tor, won his first 3 matches easily. Blood stained the white sand red. Worked tirelessly. She carried water and equipment. She cleaned blood from armor. She bandaged wounds. She was the perfect servant, quiet, efficient, invisible. And every moment, she gathered information. On the second night, she made her move. The servant corridors were empty at midnight. Most workers were asleep. The guards were focused on the arena, where a special night match was entertaining the nobles. Moved through the corridors like a shadow. She had memorized every camera position. She knew exactly where to walk to stay out of sight. The central computer hub was in Section D, 3 levels below the arena. 1 guard stood at the door, a young who looked bored. He was watching something on his personal screen and did not notice approach. Humans were invisible. Humans were nothing. That was what everyone believed. Walked past the guard like she belonged there. He did not even look up. Inside the hub, rows of computer terminals hummed with power. Lights blinked on control panels. The room was warm and smelled like electricity. Found the main power conduit. She attached the EMP device to its surface. The magnetic back held it firmly in place. She activated the timer 48 hours. Then she walked out. The guard still did not look at her. She returned to the servant quarters just as the sun cycle began. Was waiting. "It is done," said. "Tell everyone the day after tomorrow when the final matches begin. That is when we strike." Nodded. His hands were shaking slightly, but his eyes were determined. "What about you?" he asked. "Where will you be?" Looked toward the arena. "I will be exactly where I need to be." The trap was set. Now she just had to wait. The final day of the tournament arrived. The grand arena was packed with spectators. 50,000 aliens filled the seats, cheering and shouting and waving banners for their favorite fighters. The air was thick with excitement and the smell of expensive food and drink. The wealthy nobles sat in private boxes high above the fighting floor. They drank rare wines and ate exotic foods while watching blood sport below. To them, this was entertainment, culture, civilization. Moved through the crowd carrying a tray of water bottles. She wore the uniform of a servant. Her head was down. Her movements were quiet and careful. Nobody looked at her twice. Inside her pocket, she carried the activation switch for the EMP device. 1 press and the station would go dark. But not yet. The timing had to be perfect. The matches continued through the morning. Fighters from a dozen species battled in the white sand. Some matches ended quickly. Others lasted for long, bloody minutes. The crowd loved every moment. Champion Tor reached the semifinals. He was fighting a warrior with 4 arms and thick blue armor. The match was brutal. Both fighters were covered in cuts and bruises, but Tor was stronger. He grabbed this head and twisted. The crack echoed through the arena. The crowd erupted in cheers, roared with happiness in his private box. His fighter would compete in the finals. Watched from the edge of the arena floor, her face showed nothing, but inside her heart was racing. 3 more hours. That was when the finals would begin. That was when the most powerful nobles would be gathered in one place. That was when she would strike. She turned to leave the arena floor. She needed to check the positions of her people one more time. Everything had to be perfect. A hand grabbed her arm. Stopped, she looked up at the alien who had grabbed her. He was a nobleman, tall and thin with pale blue skin. His eyes were glazed from too much wine. His expensive robes were stained with food. He swayed slightly as he stood. "Human," he said, his voice slurred. "I remember you from the viewing platform." Recognized him too. Lord, he had talked to her on the first day. He had mentioned wanting to buy a human pet. "Yes, master," said quietly. "Please release me. I must return to my duties." Laughed, his grip tightened on her arm. "Your duties can wait. I have decided I want you right now." Other nobles nearby turned to watch. Some smiled with amusement. Others looked bored. This was normal entertainment to them. Powerful males took what they wanted. Servants had no rights. "I belong to," said. "You must speak to him if you wish to purchase me." "Purchase?" laughed louder. "I am lord of the 3rd house. I do not purchase servants, I take them." He pulled her closer. His breath was hot and smelled of alcohol. His other hand reached for her face. Did not move, she did not struggle. She simply looked up at him with flat, empty eyes. "Release me," she said. Her voice was calm and quiet. The nobles around them burst into laughter. A human giving orders to a lord? It was absurd, ridiculous, the funniest thing they had heard all day. Guards nearby smirked. Even some slaves looked away in embarrassment. This small human woman clearly did not understand her place. Grinned, showing pointed teeth. "Or what, little human, what will you do?" Met his eyes. "Touch me once more and you will regret it." The laughter grew louder. Nobles pointed at her and whispered to each other, "What a foolish creature, what entertainment." Raised his free hand to strike her. He would teach this animal its place. He would show everyone what happened to servants who forgot their position. His hand came down. It never reached her face. Moved faster than anyone expected. She twisted out of his grip, grabbed his arm, and pulled him off balance. In the same motion, her other hand reached to his belt and drew his ceremonial dagger. The blade was sharp. It was meant for decoration, but it was still a weapon. She opened his throat with one clean cut. Blood sprayed across the white stone floor, made a choking sound and fell. His eyes were wide with shock. He was dead before he hit the ground. For one heartbeat, everything was silent. Then chaos erupted. Nobles screamed and tried to run. Guards reached for their weapons. Other aliens rushed toward with murder in their eyes. Did not hesitate. She threw the bloody dagger at the nearest guard. It hit him in the eye. He fell. Then she pressed the switch in her pocket. The EMP pulse was invisible, but its effect was immediate. Every light in the arena went dark. Emergency systems failed. Door locks clicked open. Weapons that relied on power suddenly became useless. Communication systems died. The whole station went silent. For a moment, there was only darkness and screaming. Then the red emergency lights flickered on. They were backup systems, running on separate power. They gave just enough light to see shapes moving in the shadows. And in those shadows, humans were already moving. In the power station, disabled the backup generators for the security systems. In the hangar bay, locked every ship in place. In the medical wing, released sleeping gas into the guard barracks. Throughout the station, 37 humans acted as one. They had prepared for this moment. They had waited. They had planned, and now they struck. Picked up a fallen guard's blade. Around her, nobles trampled each other trying to escape. Guards fired blindly in the dim red light, but they could not see properly. Their targeting systems were dead. Their communication was gone. But could see. Humans had evolved on Earth to hunt at dawn and dusk. Their eyes adjusted to low light better than most species. Their ancestors had tracked prey through dark forests and moonlit plains. In the red emergency lighting, the aliens were nearly blind. Was not. She moved through the chaos like death itself. Her blade found throats and hearts with terrible precision. Every strike was calculated, every movement was efficient. 3 guards fell in the first 30 seconds. The nobles scattered like frightened animals. They ran for the exits, but the exits were blocked. They called for help, but their communicators were dead. They reached for weapons, but their weapons would not fire. They had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had enslaved hundreds of species. They had never faced a real threat. Now they understood fear. Did not feel joy or satisfaction. She felt nothing except cold focus. Every death was necessary. Every kill brought her one step closer to freedom. Around the station, the uprising spread. Slaves who had been waiting for years finally rose up. They overpowered guards. They seized weapons. They opened cell doors and freed prisoners. The grand arena of the collective, symbol of power and civilization, was falling. And at the center of it all, covered in blood and surrounded by bodies, stood a small human woman. She had warned them. They had laughed. They were not laughing anymore. The red emergency lights painted everything in blood colors. Screams echoed through the corridors of the grand arena. The most powerful station in the sector was falling into chaos. Moved through the arena floor like a ghost. Her servant uniform was now dark with blood. A guard's blade gleamed in her hand. Her eyes scanned every shadow, every movement, every threat. Around her, nobles fled in panic. They pushed and trampled each other, desperate to escape. Their fine robes tore. Their jewelry scattered on the ground. Their dignity disappeared completely. 2 minutes since the lights went out. A group of guards tried to organize a defense near the main exit. 5 of them, standing in formation, their useless pulse rifles abandoned in favor of blades and clubs. They saw approaching and braced themselves. She did not slow down. The first guard swung his club at her head. She ducked under it, drove her blade into his stomach, and used his falling body as a shield against the second guard's attack. She kicked the second guard's knee, heard it crack, and finished him with a quick slash across the throat. The third and fourth guards hesitated. That hesitation killed them. The fifth guard turned and ran. Let him go. There were bigger threats to deal with. 4 minutes since the lights went out. Throughout the station, humans were winning. Led a group of freed slaves through the medical wing. They had raided the supply room for surgical tools and chemical agents. The guards they encountered were already weakened by the sleeping gas had released. Secure the exits, ordered. No one leaves until gives the signal. Had completely disabled the main power grid. The only light came from emergency backups and personal devices. The security systems were blind. The automatic defenses were offline. The station was helpless. Had locked every ship in the hangar bay. Nobles who managed to reach their vessels found that nothing would start. The doors would not open. They were trapped. 6 minutes since the lights went out. In the arena, the fighters had finally organized. They did not care about the nobles or the guards. They saw opportunity. For years, they had been slaves too, forced to fight and kill for other people's entertainment. Now the chains were breaking. The champion with 93 kills, the other fighters. He did not know who had caused this chaos, but he knew an opportunity when he saw one. Brothers, he roared in his deep voice. Sisters, today we are not slaves. Today we are warriors. Fight with me and we will take our freedom. The fighters charged into the chaos. They attacked guards and nobles alike. They had spent their lives training to kill. Now they killed without rules, without limits. Watched from across the arena floor, she had expected this. She had planned for it. Let them fight, she muttered to herself. Let them clear the way. 8 minutes since the lights went out. The battle was nearly over. Most of the guards were dead or had surrendered. The nobles who had not escaped were huddled in corners, crying and begging for mercy. The fighters controlled the arena floor. Spotted across the blood-stained sand, he walked toward her, his massive body covered in wounds and enemy blood. His eyes studied her with new respect. Human, he said, you did this. It was not a question. Yes, replied. Was silent for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He bowed his head slightly. I have killed 93 opponents, he said. I have never seen anyone fight like you. You are small and weak, but you move like death itself. Humans are not weak, said. We are patient, there is a difference. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. I understand now. Your species was never meant to be slaves. You were meant to be hunters. 9 minutes since the lights went out. Found in the arena. His medical coat was torn and stained. There was a cut on his forehead, but he was alive and his eyes were bright with triumph. It is done, he said. The station is ours. We control all critical systems. The emergency beacon is broadcasting on Earth frequencies. Our fleet will receive it within hours. Nodded slowly. Casualties. His expression darkened. 3 confirmed, and they died freeing the children's compound. There were guards. Closed her eyes. 3 names. 3 humans who had trusted her plan. 3 people who would never see Earth again. We will remember them, she said quietly. 10 minutes since the lights went out. The grand arena was empty of enemies. The sand was red with blood. Bodies lay scattered across the floor and the seats. The smell of death filled the air. But the slaves were alive. Hundreds of them from dozens of species stood in the corridors and chambers of the station. They looked at each other with wonder. Some cried. Some laughed. Some simply stood in silence, unable to believe what had happened. They were free. Climbed to the top of the arena, to the highest seats where the wealthiest nobles had watched the fighting. She looked down at the chaos below, at the blood and the bodies and the survivors. She felt tired, so tired. The past 3 months had demanded everything from her. The planning, the secrecy, the constant danger, and now the killing. But it was not over, not even close. Joined her at the top. They stood together in silence for a long moment. What happens now? He asked finally. Looked at him, then she looked out at the stars visible through the transparent ceiling. Somewhere out there was Earth, her home, her people. This station is just the beginning, she said. There are slave markets on 40 worlds, fighting pits on 100 more, millions of beings in chains. She turned to face him fully. For the first time since her capture, she allowed herself to smile. It was not a warm smile. It was cold and sharp and full of promise. We have ships now, we have weapons, we have hundreds of freed slaves who want revenge. She looked back at the stars. Let us remind the galaxy why they should have left humanity alone. Stared at her, then he smiled too. Where do we start? Thought about it. She thought about the auction platform where she had been sold like cargo. She thought about and his fighting pits. She thought about Lord and his arrogant hands. Nexus 7, she said. The slave market where I was sold, we start there. She turned and walked toward the stairs. There was work to do, plans to make, a galaxy to burn. Behind her followed. And somewhere in the darkness of space, a tiny signal raced toward Earth. It carried a simple message. We are coming home, and we are bringing war. 60 years later, historians would mark this night as the beginning of the human uprising. The species that had been dismissed as weak and primitive would tear down an empire that had stood for 10,000 years. They would ask themselves how they had miscalculated so badly. The answer was simple. They had looked at humans and seen small bodies and short lives. They had seen no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons. They never saw the patience, the planning, the absolute refusal to stay broken. And by the time they understood, it was already far too late.